The Ben Heck Show is brought to you by Element 14, the electronic design community where you can connect and collaborate with top engineers from around the world. Join now at element14.com. Whoops! Sorry about that. I lost my balance.
Ben, what are you doing with all of those dev kits?
Well, I was going to try a few out, but, it's kind of a pain. I have to go find an HDMI screen, keyboard, mouse, power supply. Oh, it's so much work.
What if all of those things were in one box?
You mean like an all-in-one dev kit solution that you could just plug a random board into?
That sounds like a great idea for an episode.
I think we should do that. Let's get started.
Amazing hacks.
Where are my dragons?
Inspired designs.
Oh, like I knocked some hot glue loose.
Regrettable acting.
I want to live in a world with Star Wars again!
Each week, Element 14's The Ben Heck Show brings you innovative projects using electronics, engineering, and more.
All right, let's come up with some designs for the Lunchbox dev kit. So, your classic Lunchbox is just kind of a big square thing. I guess they were more of a rectangle, but you know what I mean. And then you'd have your character on the side. This is He-Man, allegedly. Let's give him a sword. By the power of Grayskull, I am He-Man. Oh, he needs like some muscles. That doesn't look good at all. Anyway, so what I'm thinking is, the lunchbox, we're gonna have to make our own lunchbox. If we went to Target and grabbed one, it wouldn't be big enough for the screen. Kind of thinking it opens up, like a lunchbox. You could have the screen inside of it like that, and then there could be a keyboard in front of that on some magnetic clips, and then when you want to use it, you pull the keyboard out and stick it down here in the lid. That way you can tote it around to school and whatnot and have all of your cables and dev boards in this area. That way they're pressing against the back of the keyboard instead of scratching up your screen. The one drawback with that I could see is that the viewing angle might not be so great. If the screen is in the back of the box, it's going to be kind of, surrounded by material. That could be a negative. Maybe what we could do is we could have the screen kind of up here on a hinge, and then you store everything behind it, and the keyboard is affixed into the lid here. And then what we could do is we could have a hinge, and then the keyboard could swing out, allowing you to get at the stuff, but then it swings back into position and has like a magnet. That way you don't have any of these loose parts scratching up the screen. And if the screen is fixed with a magnet and the keyboard is fixed in the lid, then they won't scratch either. I think what we should probably do is get some foam core and do some tests to see if the viewing angles with the screen inside of the box would be sufficient, because that would be the easiest way to build it. I mean, it's a 1 week project and we're already having to build our own custom lunchbox, so we might not have a lot of options here. But that's the basic premise, is it's shaped like a lunchbox and it's got a computer in it. Because a lot of computers, portable computers in the 80s, they'd have a keyboard like this, and there'd be like a big box, kind of like that, and that would be your computer. You'd have a screen like that, 2 disk drives, and then this would fold down. So that was, what they call that, a luggable computer back in the day, I think. You could use the computer to write about the Berlin Wall falling and stuff. Then usually there'd be a handle back here. So I'm doing something along these lines. We're just making it fit inside of a lunchbox shape. But if you could hold several dev boards and a power supply and everything else, that'd be nice. So you just take this thing around shows like, hey, oh, here's the new dev board I should try, huh? Well, let me plug it in, la 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 la, and go to town. We've been researching this episode for a while now, and the idea we came up with was to use a Motorola Atrix phone dock as the basis of our Lunchbox dev kit. So check this out. You would stick your Motorola Atrix phone here. There's a USB and a micro HDMI port. Then inside of this, see, you've got a medium-sized HDMI screen, which is really hard to find, and a keyboard, mouse, batteries, speakers, pretty much all the stuff you'd have on a laptop. So there's a lot of parts we can get out of this thing. So let's crack her open. Whenever I pop open these feet and I don't find a screw, it's kind of like when Robert Stack opened up Al Capone's vault. It was like this 4-hour event. He's like, I'm Robert Stack from Unsolved Mysteries. There's a vault here that Al Capone had. I wonder what's inside of it. It had been sealed for I guess at that time it would have been 50 years. You opened it up and there was nothing inside of it but dirt. Kind of makes you wonder, how many treasure vaults could be left in the world? I'm thinking this is some sort of Hall effect sensor or reed switch. What happens is when you open the case, it gets closer to it, telling the system that the case has been opened. That's my guess. I guess the question is where the controller is. I'm thinking that the HDMI controller is on this board, and this is just the LVDS going to the screen. We could probably take apart the screen in a little bit. Pretty much all of these dev boards, with the exception of maybe the BeagleBone Black, have a full-size HDMI port, so we might have to wire up a converter for this LCD. That's probably the main negative with it. Well, this clearly went to the screen, and there's a USB port, which I would assume gets replicated here, although it probably also sends audio. So this may also have an audio driver of some kind on it, and probably a keyboard controller and a charge controller. By ripping this apart, we'll get a better idea of what these circuits on this little board here actually do. The main thing we want, though, is the HDMI controller. Oh, looks like these pull out individually. Okay, whoop. There we go. Happy little clouds. So what we could do, even though it might seem horrible, is cut this apart and then rewire it directly to a plug. There's not that many connections on HDMI. I've certainly wired worse things. Okay, I'm gonna take apart the base to learn some more about the top of it. See all these connections going to the keyboard on this ribbon cable? That tells us that the keyboard is just matrixed on this controller. So if you plug this in to a regular PC, you'd probably get a keyboard and a mouse as USB devices. Okay, so here's the battery connector, see here? So you've probably got, oh wait, no, that's the speaker connector, never mind. All right, so here's the battery connector. It's probably balancing between the cells. It looks like there's 3 main cells. Well, here's the touchpad and the buttons. You can see it right here. I don't know why there's 2 things for it. There might be one for the touchpad and another for the buttons. There is some circuitry built into this, but again, I don't know if it would actually function without the host controller. All right, let's take a closer look at this. Ugh, that's kind of messy. I see they've got glue on it. The chip looks like it's been sanded off. I mean, this is obviously going to be some sort of charge controller for the lithium-ion batteries, so I don't know if it's really reusable. It's a decent battery pack. I mean, you know, this isn't too dissimilar from what's in an average netbook. Okay, so what we've learned by taking the base apart is that this acts as a USB hub and an audio card and a keyboard and a mouse. So I mean, I guess we could use this with a dev board to attach those peripherals. Yeah, but also I believe the HDMI is going to be converted on here. So an HDMI signal is LVDS, low voltage differential signaling. And that's also what LCDs use, although that technology is starting to change. However, that doesn't mean they're directly compatible. Usually the LCD will have its own protocol, and there'll be a chip between the two that takes the HDMI signals and converts them to what works on the screen. Because an HDMI signal may also have information such as audio encoded into it that the screen doesn't need, so you're gonna have other circuitry that strips that out. I guess we can take a look at the LCD here. Looks like there's some screws that I can probably get at. So the metal bezel was just glued in place. I wanted to be careful as I did it because I didn't want to crack the edges of the glass. That's where all the connections are made, and that's the most fragile part. So I've reconnected just enough so I think I can get the batteries charging. This didn't come with the original charger, but I looked it up online. It's 19 volts inner positive, so it should work. There we go. Pulsating charge light. And then down here, this was like the status bar for the batteries, also combined with the mouse pad buttons. So if I click a button, I should get an indicator. Okay, yes, it is 1/5 charged. So I'm gonna let this go for a while and get the batteries charged up, just so there's one less thing that could possibly go wrong. I've got the batteries about halfway charged up. We need to find something that has a micro HDMI port on it so we can make sure this thing works. The only thing we have right now with that port is a BeagleBone Black, but it doesn't have a kernel on it that will use the HDMI port. So Felix is getting that set up now. The reason I want to test it first is because eventually I want to take this plug and actually cut it up and manually wire it into a full-size HDMI plug so it can be used with pretty much anything. But I want to make sure that this unit works before I chop anything up. That way, if I chop things up, I'll know it was my fault it stopped working and not something else's fault. Ideally, I'd like to use only the HDMI driver from this Motorola Atrix laptop. There's just too much other stuff I don't really care about. And the battery packs are nice. So I'm gonna try to get it to display from this BeagleBone Black, since it's the only thing we have with the mini HDMI. So I'll power it up. I looked it up online. This thing didn't come with the power supply, but it's about 19 volts. Okay, there's something out of it. Let's reset the BeagleBone and see if we get some sort of image or splash screen. We just need to know that the HDMI works. It is possible that since there's speakers on this laptop dock, that it could get audio over HDMI. I'm not sure exactly how that old cell phone worked. Oh, there we go. In that case, maybe we will keep the speakers. However, we probably won't hook up the battery pack. We might keep the touchpad. The reason I don't want to use the battery pack is I think it will probably be insufficient to power most dev boards. I mean, you might get 500 milliamps out of it, enough to charge a cell phone, but not really run a full dev board. I noticed something kind of funky with this. It's the battery power indicator. If you push this button, these light up. And it's also the tack switches for the trackpad. And sometimes when you plug it in, it causes the unit to boot faster. And I'm not sure if this is actually what turns it on or not, actually having to click these buttons, because there's no main power switch on this laptop dock. However, we were also having trouble with this particular BeagleBone Black. It wasn't booting up properly, so the splash screen might be all we get. But, I mean, it shows us that the HDMI port is working. So what I'm thinking I'm going to do next is actually start to take this apart and find the connections and then manually wire this up to a full-sized HDMI jack, which we can plug into anything. It's time for a tech timeout. While we were working on the Lunchbox dev kit, coincidentally, the UPS guy stopped by and brought us some more dev kits from Element 14. Let's do an unboxing. Raspberry Pi Sense Hat, okay. LED matrix, accelerometer, gyroscope, and magnetometer, okay. Air pressure sensor, temperature and humidity sensor, and a small joystick. Accelerometer, that could be useful for our luggage detective project. I wonder if these are RGB LEDs. Oh, look at the small joystick. That is pretty small. All right, so this down here looks like an LED driver. This is labeled the accelerometer, gyroscope, and magnetometer, pressure and humidity. So, this could have been good for luggage detective, which is an upcoming episode we have, although I think this is probably overkill. And then, I don't know what that chip is. This is probably some sort of buffer. This is a ATtiny88, so this is actually a little microcontroller. So yeah, pretty cool. So you could actually make a little game with the joystick here, or sense humidity and pressure. So that's kind of cool. So you could put this with luggage detective, for instance, and see, ooh, what's the pressure underneath the plane? Because it's lower than what's inside the plane. Even inside of a plane, it's only pressurized to about 5,000 feet. Finally, a Raspberry Pi 3. We still haven't seen the Zero. As far as we're concerned, it's a myth. Okay, and they also sent us what looks like the original Raspberry Pi. Let's compare them. Well, obviously there's a much bigger header on the new Raspberry Pi. They combined the audio and the analog video into one port. And we still have the Ethernet and USB hub chip like we did in the old version. I wonder if that's still the least efficient part of the system. If you watch some of our older videos, we put this on the IR, and this actually gets a lot warmer than the main Broadcom chip. So the new Raspberry Pi 3 is supposed to have Bluetooth and wireless, I believe. Oh gosh, so what's new on here? Well, they didn't have this before. This is probably either the wireless Bluetooth adapter or some sort of external RAM. Oh God, remember when they had these giant SD card slots? What a silly idea. Okay, I spent the time to look it up online. This is definitely 1 gigabyte of DRAM, so that's where they put it. Mystery solved. So I'm guessing this over here is going to be the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth. Okay, well, that's pretty cool. I mean, Wi-Fi is a pretty cool thing to have installed because you don't have to have those dongles sticking out the end. The Raspberry Pi just keeps getting better and better. Well, thanks Element 14 for sending us those new dev boards. We can test them as soon as we get the Lunchbox dev kit complete. And now, back to the build. Well, I've been slowly peeling back this adhesive shielding to reveal the cables underneath. I don't want to cut it because the cables are so thin, I might accidentally cut them. I'm going to remove it as far as I can just to expose all the wires, and then hopefully with this I can wire a direct connection to an HDMI full-size plug. That way we can use this Atrix laptop dock with anything else we have laying around. So once I get this all separated, I will begin the slow and tedious wiring process to make an adapter manually. I'm carefully wiring the micro HDMI port from the Motorola Atrix up to a full-size HDMI port that we can plug into anything. I'm doing this with the data wires first and then the differential pairs, making sure I keep everything as isolated as possible. Once I test it and know that it works, then I can glue everything up into a single cable and heat shrink tube it to protect it. Karen found something at our hackerspace. A box.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I guess it held medical equipment or something. This might be a good way to get a lunchbox sized kit going. It's even got a window in front, although I don't think it quite fits our screen, unfortunately. Yeah, maybe we could try to build something, by hand without using all the fancy computerized equipment.
Yeah.
Plus the laser lenses, in the shop, so to speak. Well, if we had this, we could use some of this chain that I think we took off a lamp, bolt it here. Yeah. That'd be pretty good. I guess we could just do that right now.
Oh, this is a nice sturdy box.
Yeah, let's grab some short machine screws, I think. I'll grab some clippers to cut the chain. For this project, we're trying to use up whatever materials we have around the shop to recycle them. I found this chain from an old overhead lamp we no longer use, and I'm going to use it to hinge the back of the case so it doesn't flop too far open. The chain's a little rougher than I would like it to be, but I think we can make it work. We then create a paper pattern by taping two separate printouts together to make a larger printout, and we're going to use this to cut a pattern into some engraving plastic to create the frame that will go around the LCD inside of the unit. So the LCD has been Velcroed to the inside of the case. Karen is going to cut some cool graphics here that will cover up this window and then also light up when the screen does. We have our screen in place. I haven't peeled the film yet. Ribbon cable going down to our driver board, HDMI. Got this 19 volt laptop power supply. We're going to cut a hole for it so the AC can go out the back. This will go to a toggle switch, which will be the main power that will send 19 volts to this driver board, and then we'll knock down the 19 volts to 5 volts and then create multiple power plugs for the dev boards, which will fit right here. And then also we'll make a place to attach the keyboard and also store the power cable. So this is all one self-contained unit. Okay, we may have used a few machines to create this episode. Karen used the vinyl cutter to print some letters in reverse, and we're going to apply these to the inside of the window on this case to make a cool backlit logo. The backlighting of the LCD will press up against it and light it while the unit is on. I cut this plastic piece to fit the corner here, and then we've wired up a regulator and an LED, so we can basically take the 19 volts here, knock it down to 5 for the dev boards, and there's an indicator light and a big fat toggle switch. So I'm just going to use some foam to attach this in the corner, and we'll be one step closer to our goal. I'm using the 3D printer to create a few parts, a couple of these standoffs that will hold the keyboard, as well as this dog bone shaped thing that will hold the extra cables inside the case. All right, Karen, ready to flip the switch?
I think I need a countdown.
Do it. There we go. So you can store a whole bunch of dev kits in here. The keyboard sitting here protects the screen from anything flopping around so the dev kits don't scratch up the screen.
Nice.
Yeah, and we have our nice hand-cut frame. Yeah, the Motorola Atrix screen is pretty decent. I mean, it's like 4 years old, so it's not, you're not gonna mistake it for like a Retina display or anything, but it's about $50, $60 to get the whole thing used off eBay, and as you saw, there are many parts. We only reused the screen, but you could also get the keyboard, batteries, charger, everything, so not bad. Is it Minecraft on here? Oh yeah.
Oh man.
It's always good when you can take excess things in your shop and reuse them. It's kind of like Minecraft. You're taking random things and you're repurposing them and clearing them out of the way.
You're gonna dig until you reach the ocean or China?
I think there's lava at the bottom. Eventually you can fall into it and die. Shall we see if we can find it?
So you're just making a death pit?
Yes. I'm digging my own grave. Oh no!
Oh,
the hollow earth theory is true!
Oh, that didn't look like lava.
Yeah, it was like just emptiness. So So what do you think, Karen? Is there anything else we should have added or could add in the future?
Well, yeah, I think so. It's really nice that you can just kind of plop it open and plug it in, but I think it would be really nice to be able to have some sort of battery in here. So even if you just needed to get from one power plug to the next, then you could have a little your system on a little.
There is a reason we didn't use the battery pack from the Motorola Atrix docks, and that is because it wouldn't have had enough juice to power the screen and a Raspberry Pi 3 or pretty much any modern dev board.
Yeah.
However, we could create a battery pack maybe right here and then take a charging circuit. I mean, this power supply has plenty of juice to charge up some batteries. So yeah, we'd have to wire up a charging circuit, but it could be done. Maybe in the future, if we have time, we could add that.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. And I think the other thing that I would maybe do is add some sort of compartments in here so that you would have a place to keep like your mouse or somewhere where the boards could just kind of sit in there a little sturdier.
We could do dividers under the keyboard.
Yeah, but other than that, I think it's really great.
Yeah, it worked out well. Now it's time for a research update.
Hey, in a future episode, we're going to be working on a project that is going to require us to capture a log of acceleration and motion on an object. So I've been tasked with inventorying different dev kits that we have around the shop that might help us with this. So I found a few kits here. This one is the Freescale Freedom platform. It's got an accelerometer on here, so that might help us. What we want to build is going to be a lot simpler than this, but this could be a stepping stone for us. Let's see, what else we got here? Another Freescale device, the LFSTBEB3110 magnetometer and accelerometer. Oh yeah, so this magnometer here, this is an interesting little package. So this is the sensors here. That could be helpful. All right, what else we got? Another Freescale device, MMA9559LKUBE Accelicube demo motion sensing platform. That's interesting. All right, what's this? Quick start guide. Oh, it's got lights on it. Put a battery in here. Oh, okay, so green, blue, red. So we can detect different axes and it blinks different colors. That's pretty cool. So the last thing we have here is the yaw rate gyroscope IC function accelerometer. So this seems like a really nice little package. Might be a little challenging to solder onto, but we could do it. Now I found these 3 different components that we could potentially use for this project. Next, what I think I'll do is find different ways that we can access the data on these and find out which one would work best for our application.
That's all the time we have for today. I think this turned out pretty good for a 1-week build.
Yeah, I agree. Is there anything else you'd like to see us add to the Lunchbox Dev Kit? Let us know on the Element 14 community on element14.com/TBHS.
Where you can read about our upcoming episodes, builds, and special events. We'll see you next time. Let's rebuild the Titanic block by block.
I'll never let go, Jack.
The ship can't sink. I was the dad in Alias. The Ben Heck Show is brought to you by Element 14, the electronic design community where you can connect and collaborate with top engineers from around the world. Join now at element14.com.